Welcome back to This is Thailand. Today's story comes from a man named Garth Wilkes, 54 years old from Western Alberta, up in the coal country outside Grande Cache. 28 years underground and in the open pits, 11 of those running a dragline crew. The kind of man who doesn't raise his voice and doesn't panic and doesn't say much unless he's got something worth saying. He came to Thailand carefully. That's the part that stays with you. He didn't come for walking street. He didn't come for the beaches. He came with a plan and a budget and a spiral notebook. And he did more homework than most men do in 10 years here. And 4 days before his wedding, standing outside a house in a village in Calasan province, he heard something that took all of it apart. He doesn't tell this story angry. That's what makes it different. There's no villain in it, not really. And I think that's what he's still trying to work out. This one's going to stick with you. Here's his story in his own words. 28 years I worked coal. Grande Cache first, then Coal Valley, then Cardinal River when they were still running. Underground and then open pit, and if you don't know the difference, don't worry about it. Dirty either way. Cold in a way that gets into the bones and stays there. My old man did it. His old man did it. It's not a job you choose so much as a job that's just sort of sitting there waiting for you when you turn 19. Last 11 years I was shift lead on a dragline crew. 12 men. And I'll tell you the thing I'm proudest of in my whole life, and it's not much of a thing to somebody who's never done it. But here it is. 11 years and not one man on my shift got seriously hurt. Not one. Cut fingers, sure. Guy broke a wrist in the lot, but that was ice. That doesn't count. But nothing bad. Nothing that ended somebody. That's because I checked. That was the whole of it. I checked everything. Twice on slow. Guys used to give me the business about it. Wilksy and his clipboard. Take him 20 minutes to check a thing you could check in 5. But nobody ever complained on the drive home. So that was me. Big, slow, careful guy who didn't panic. Then the mine wound down. And look, I want to be clear about this, because people hear a mine closed and they think that's the sad part. It wasn't. Mine closing is weather. It's economics. It's China. It's price per ton. It's some meeting in Calgary I was never going to be invited to. Nobody's fault. You can't be humiliated by weather. The severance was decent. The RRSP I'd been feeding since I was 26 was decent. And my dad's quarter section outside Grande Cache, which I sold in the spring of 2021 because I was rattling around in it alone, and the taxes were what they were. Put it all together and it was the most money I'd ever had in my life at one time. Real money. Retirement money. And then a fella I'd worked with. I won't say his name. It wasn't really his fault either. His brother-in-law had a thing. Private placement, junior mining outfit, pre-IPO shares, real geologists, real drill results, real Calgary money already in it. And he says to me, Garth, this doesn't come to guys like us. This comes to guys who know guys. You're a guy who knows a guy. And I want you to understand something. I checked. I did. I read the prospectus. I read it twice, sitting at my kitchen table with a pencil, the way I'd read a lift plan. I called the number. I looked up the directors. Everything I checked came back clean. And everything I checked came back clean because everything I checked was actually there. The company was real. The deposit was real. The permits were not. You don't need the whole thing. It took 2 years and a lawyer in Edmonton, and at the end of it, I got 11 cents on the dollar. 11. I remember I was sitting in my truck in the Canadian Tire lot in Hinton when the final number came through, and I didn't do anything. Didn't yell, didn't cry, didn't hit the wheel. I just sat there and looked at my phone for probably 40 minutes. There was a ham sandwich on the passenger seat I never ate. Just sat there getting warm. My brother Dale called that week and asked how bad it was. I said manageable. We both knew that was a lie and we both let it sit there, because that's how it works in my family. You put the thing in a box and you don't open the box. Here's what I couldn't get past though. And this is the part one I've had 3 years to chew on. The mine was weather. But this was me. I chose it. Nobody made me. I did all my checking and I signed anyway. And the reason I signed anyway is that I wanted it. I wanted the shortcut. 28 years, I never wanted a shortcut in my life. And then one time I did, and it took everything. So after that, I stopped trusting myself. That sounds dramatic. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. It was just this thing where I'd go to make a decision, what truck to buy, whether to take a contract job in Fort Mac. And there'd be this little voice going, well, you thought you knew last time too. The one tool I had. The one thing I was good for. And I couldn't trust it anymore. Anyway, the arithmetic, here's the arithmetic. Canadian pension, the mining one, doesn't pay me properly till I'm 60. Before that, it's a partial and it's not much. CPP bridge on top. Call it 1,600 a month Canadian once it all kicks in, and less than that till then. And in the bank, after the lawyers, about $26,000. $26,000 and 51 years old. You cannot live in Alberta on that. I'm not being dramatic. Heating alone in Grande Cash in January will take a bite out of you that you feel. And I'm scrolling Facebook one night in February, and there's Wayne. Wayne worked the pit with me in the early 2000s. Big, loud fella, terrible driver. And Wayne's put up a photo of himself sitting outside a little house in a place called Udon Thani in Thailand. And there's a mango tree in the yard, and he's got a beer in his hand. And the caption says something like, "Rent here is less than my old power bill." That's it. That's the whole thing. That's what brought me 8,000 miles. Not love, not girls. I want that on the record because I know what you're thinking, and I'd be thinking it too. It was a mango tree and a power bill. I looked at the numbers for about 6 weeks. I made a spreadsheet, because of course I did. Rent, food, visa, medical. And the numbers worked. The numbers worked in a way that no numbers had worked for me in 3 years. And underneath the numbers there was another thing, and I didn't write that one on the spreadsheet. It was this. Over there, nobody knows. Nobody knows about the placement. Nobody knows about the quarter section. Nobody's looking at me in the co-op in Hinton thinking there's the guy who threw it all away on a paper mine. I could just be a big Canadian who fixes things. I flew out of Edmonton on a Tuesday morning in February 2023 with 2 bags and a spiral notebook. 51 years old, broke by my own hand. Careful as hell about everything except the one thing that mattered. You'd think a man who'd learned that lesson once wouldn't need to learn it twice. Bangkok nearly sent me home. I want to be honest about that. I landed at Suvarnabhumi on a Tuesday night in February 2023, and I walked out those doors and the air hit me like standing too close to an oven door when you open it. That thick, wet heat. And I'm a guy who spent his whole life being cold. You'd think I'd have liked it. I didn't like it. I'd booked a place off Sukhumvit because that's what the internet says to do, and I spent 4 days in that city feeling like a piece of equipment somebody had left out in the wrong yard. Everything moving. Motorbikes coming at you from directions there shouldn't be directions. Kids on scooters with 3 people on them and a crate of eggs. The BTS above your head making that noise. Some guy at Nana with a laminated card trying to show me photographs I didn't want to look at, and me standing there going, "No thanks, no thanks, sorry," backing up like a fool. I'm 6'3" and I weigh 240 pounds, and I have never in my life felt smaller than I did on Sukhumvit Soy 11 at 10 o'clock at night. 4 days. That's all I lasted. And I want to be clear on something, because this is the part everybody assumes. One did not come for the girls. I didn't. Not out of virtue. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I'm a saint, but out of arithmetic. I came because of a mango tree and a power bill, and a guy who comes for the arithmetic goes north. So I got on the overnight train to Udon Thani, 3rd class, because I was watching every dollar, and I sat on a wooden bench with the windows open and a fan going. That did nothing. And there was a woman across from me who fell asleep on her kid's shoulder, and somewhere around 2 in the morning, we were rolling through this flat black nothing with the odd light in it, and I put my head against the window frame, and something in me just let go a little. I don't know how else to say it. The city was noise. The train was rhythm. I'd spent 28 years working shifts. I understand rhythm. Udon Thani in the morning smelled like charcoal and diesel and something sweet I couldn't place. Wayne met me at the station in a beat-up Isuzu with the passenger door held shut by a bungee cord, and he shouted my name across the lot like we were still in the pit. He set me up. Room in a little block off the Nong project side, B4,500 a month, about $175 Canadian, And I've paid more than that for a hotel night in Calgary. Bought a used Honda Wave for about 18,000, call it $700, and it leaked oil, and I fixed it in an afternoon in the yard while the landlady's dog watched me from the shade. That was the first day I was happy. Sitting on a plastic stool with a Wave in pieces and my hands black and a Leo sweating on the concrete beside me. Wayne showed me the expat orbit. There's an Irish pub in Udon and a Sunday morning thing where you can get a fry-up, and I went a few times. I'll be straight with you. I didn't care for it. There's a certain kind of fella who's been here 15 years and is absolutely livid about all of it. About the immigration office, about the price of cheese, about women mostly. He's got a wife or an ex-wife, and he's got a story, and the story's always the same story, and he's told it 4,000 times. And you can see him getting a little charge off it, like the anger's the only thing keeping the lights on in there. I'd sit there and nod, big quiet Canadian, and I'd think, I know exactly what you are. You're a guy who got burned once and decided the world did it to him. And I remember thinking, very clearly, I am not going to become that. Whatever else happens, I'm not going to be 68 in a pub in Udon, telling this to a stranger. Well, here we are, I suppose. But here's the real thing, and this is the part one've never said out loud to anybody, including Wayne. Down there, nobody knew. Nobody knew about the placement. Nobody knew about my dad's quarter section. Nobody in Udon Thani had ever once looked at me across the counter at the co-op and thought, there's the guy who threw it all away on a paper mine. I was just a big Canadian who fixed things. You cannot put a price on that, and I've tried because I'm the kind of man who tries to put a price on things. So I fixed things. Not for money. I couldn't work, no work permit, and I wasn't stupid about that. I did it for free. The landlady's water pump, a generator for a guy 2 streets over who ran a laundry, some fella's rototiller that hadn't run since the floods. And in June, an old boy up the road named Prasit had a Kubota tractor with a seized bearing on the front axle, and I got it apart, and I couldn't source the part locally, and Prasit said, go to the dealership on the ring road, they order. So I went to the dealership on the ring road, and that's Fi. She was behind the counter with a ledger and a calculator, and one of those little plastic fans clipped to the monitor, and I put a filthy bearing on the counter, and I said, the part number 1500 got off a form, and she looked at it, and she said, no. And I said, no what? And she said, that number wrong. 20 minutes we went at it. 20 minutes. I had a photo on my phone. She had a parts book with the cover falling off. She kept saying that number for the other model, and I kept saying, no, it's the L series, I checked. And she kept saying, mister, I sell this tractor. She was right, by the way. She was completely right, and I was completely wrong. And I stood there in a farm machinery dealership in Isan with my ears going red like I was 19 years old. I went back the next week with the correct number written on the back of my hand in ballpoint, and I held it up and she laughed. Properly laughed, like a bark, not a giggle. And that was that. Now let me tell you what she wasn't, and I want you to hear me building this, because I built it. I built it very carefully, and I leaned on it for 3 years. She wasn't a bar. There was no bar. I have never bar-fined a woman in my life, and I never did. She wasn't an app. I never was on those. Wouldn't know how. She wasn't Pattaya. She'd never been to Pattaya. She thought Pattaya was for lunatics. She was 34. She had a job, an actual job, with a lanyard and a boss and a schedule. She was divorced, and she had a 9-year-old girl called Ploy who lived with her mother out in Kalasan during the week. She wore a company polo shirt, and she was tired at the end of the day the same way I used to be tired. That's what I told myself. That's the file I opened. And you know I'd done a pre-shift inspection every working day of my adult life. You walk the machine. You check the ropes, the boom, the pins, the fluid. You tick the boxes. And if the boxes tick, the machine runs. I ticked the boxes, all of them. Wayne at the pub, when I told him I'd been back to the dealership 3 or 4 times and hadn't bought anything. Careful, Garth. Everybody's got a story here. I said, yeah, no, this isn't that. And he let it go because that's what men like us do. You say your piece once and then it's the other fella's business. First proper meal was at a noodle place she picked, a little open front joint near Central, plastic stools, the ones that are about 6 inches off the ground, so I looked like a grown man sitting on a child's chair. Boat noodles. She ordered for me because I couldn't read the board, and she watched me eat them and told me I was eating them wrong. And when the bill came, by 160, call it $6, she put down 80 baht. 80 baht, half. I pushed it back, and she pushed it at me again, and there was a little heat in her face when she did it, and she said, "I pay my part." One thought about that 80 baht for a long time afterwards. I thought about it every single time I gave her money for the next 3 years. Here's the thing nobody tells you about being careful. Being careful feels the same whether you're right or wrong. I want to walk you through what I did from June of 2023 through to the start of 2024, because you need to understand that I wasn't some lonely old fool throwing money at the first woman who smiled at him. I did it properly. I did it the way I'd have done a lift plan on a 100-ton bucket. And I'm not saying that to defend myself. I'm saying it because that's the whole point of this story. And if you miss it, you'll walk out of here thinking you're smarter than me. You're probably not. No offense. First thing I did was learn the language. Not phrasebook stuff, not Sawasti crap and pointing at a menu. I mean, I got up at 5:30 every morning. Same time I got up for shift my whole life. Body doesn't care that you're retired. And I did an hour of Thai. Flashcards, an app, a tutor over video for 200 baht an hour, about $8. This patient young woman in Khon Kaen who never once laughed at me. The tones nearly killed me, 5 of them. Same syllable, 5 meanings, and one of them's a swear word. Alberta mouth wasn't built for it. But I'd sit there in the dark with my coffee going through it again and again, the way you go through a checklist, and after about 8 months I could follow a conversation. After 14, I could hold one. And here's the thing I never did. I never spoke it in front of her family. I want to be honest about why, because for a long time I told myself it was shyness. And it was, partly. My tones were rough, and I hated the idea of an entire yard full of people trying not to laugh at the big Canadian. But there was another reason underneath it, and I didn't look at it too closely at the time. Being the quiet one is comfortable. You sit there and you nod and you smile and people talk around you and you're safe, sort of. Nobody expects anything from you. I'd been that guy my whole life in a room full of Albertans, so I just kept being him in a room full of Thais. By the time I was any good, the concrete had set. I was the big Farang who nods. Nobody in that family ever heard me say one word of Thai. Remember that. That's the whole story actually, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Second thing, the money now. This is where I built my case, and I built it high, because Phi would not take money. I don't mean she was coy about it. I mean she got genuinely irritated with me. I offered to fill her scooter up one evening. She rode a Fino, this little pink thing that looked ridiculous on her, because she wasn't a small woman. She was solid. She carried herself like she'd been carrying things her whole life. And I said I'd get the petrol, and she looked at me like I'd insulted her mother. Why? You think I cannot buy petrol? Another time, a month or 2 in, her mom's phone got cut off. 200 and something baht, $9 Canadian, nothing. I went and paid it at the 7-Eleven because you can pay anything at the 7-Eleven, and I told her, and she made me show her the receipt, and then she gave me 250 baht in cash right there in the parking lot and wouldn't put her hand down until I took it. 8 months of that. 8. And I want you to understand what that did to a man like me, because my whole model of the world after the placement was this. A scam looks like free money. That's it. That's what I'd learned. Somebody offers you something for nothing. Somebody makes it easy. Somebody says this doesn't come to guys like us. That's the shape of it. That's the tell. So a woman who fought me over 250 baht? That wasn't the shape. That was the opposite of the shape. I ticked that box so hard I put a hole in the paper. Third thing, the family. She took me out to Callison in the autumn. 2 hours on the bus, then a Songthaew down a road that turned to red dirt, in a village that's maybe 40 houses and a wat, in a shop that sells 3 things. Her mother, May Samjit, everyone called her May, was maybe 65, diabetic, sharp as a tack, sat on a raised wooden platform under the house chewing betel and running the whole operation from up there like a foreman. Grandmother, older still, blind in one eye, laughed at everything. Cousins in and out, chickens, a dog with a bad leg, and Ploy, 9 years old, missing a front tooth, absolutely fearless. She took one look at this enormous white man and went and got a piece of paper and drew a picture of him, and it was terrible, and I've still got it. I was good there. I'll say that for myself. I wasn't charming. I've never been charming. But the water pump was making a noise, and I took it apart on the concrete and put a new seal in it. And May watched me do it from the platform and didn't say a word. And afterwards, she sent one of the kids down with a plate of somtam so hot it took the roof off my mouth, and I ate all of it, and she laughed. That's the only currency I've ever had, honestly. Being useful and not complaining. They told me about Tan that weekend. Ploy's father. He was down in Rayong working, some factory job, and Phi said it flat and quick. Finished, long time, and moved on to something else. And I let her move on. I think about that. Not because she lied. She didn't lie. Everything she told me about Tan was, as far as I know, completely true. It's just that finished is a word that means about 6 different things, depending on who's saying it, and I heard the one I wanted. I should have asked more. Didn't. Filed it. Closed the file. 4th thing, and this was the moment. This was the actual moment. November, and I'd come by the dealership to pick her up at 6, and she wasn't done. The owner's son had been doing the books for a month and had made an unbelievable mess of them. And she was in there with 3 ledgers open and the little plastic fan going, and she was fixing it, line by line. I sat in the plastic chair by the door, and I waited. She finished at 9:10, and I sat there in that hot little office with the fluorescent tube buzzing and the smell of oil and paper, watching a 34-year-old woman do somebody else's job properly at 9 o'clock at night because it was wrong and it bothered her. And I thought, all right, there it is. That's the same thing I am. That's the same animal. And underneath that thought, quieter, the one I really wanted. Maybe I'm not broken. Maybe I can still see a thing clearly. Maybe the placement was the exception and not the rule. That's what she gave me. Not love, not at first. She gave me my judgment back, which is the most expensive gift I've ever received. They moved in with me in February 2024. Rented a proper house out past the ring road, 3 bedrooms, BR Inchi 9,000 a month, 350 Canadian, and a place like that in Alberta would be $2,000. Ploy came up from the village for school terms. May stayed in Clausen, and I insisted on the money. Me. That was my idea, not hers. I said, look, you're paying rent on your old place, you're feeding a kid, I've got a pension coming. Let me put in bush 15,000 a month for the house, 600 Canadian near enough, and I did the arithmetic out loud for her at the kitchen table because I do everything out loud at a kitchen table with a pencil, and I showed her it worked. She didn't want it. She argued. Then she went quiet in that way she had, and she looked at the paper and she said, I don't want your money. I want you don't leave. And I said, well, that's what the money's for. It means I'm staying. I remember I was pleased with that. I remember thinking that was a good thing to have said. I stand by it, actually. I think I meant it, and I think she meant hers. That's what makes this so hard to tell. I want to tell you about 2024 before I tell you about the money, because otherwise you'll think it was all money, and it wasn't. It was good. I'm 54 years old, and I've had maybe 3 good years in my life, and one of them was that one. We had the house past the ring road, 3 bedrooms, concrete, tile floors, a yard with a jackfruit tree and a spirit house in the corner that Phi kept properly. Flowers, red Fanta, the little bit of rice. I put a gate on it because the old one didn't shut. Took me a Saturday. I'd get up at 5:30 out of habit, sit outside with my coffee doing my Thai flashcards while it was still cool, and you could hear the temple bell going somewhere over past the school, and the roosters, and a neighbor's wave coughing to life. Then the heat would start coming up out of the ground about 7, and I'd go in. Ploy called me Lung Ya, Uncle Ya, because she couldn't get her mouth around Garth, and she tried, and it came out as this strangled noise, and she laughed so hard she fell off the chair. So, Lung Ya. She was 10 by then, absolutely relentless. She'd stand there while I was fixing something and just narrate it. Hand me the wrong tool on purpose. Fall about laughing. Weekends we'd go out to Clausen, 2 hours down the highway, and I'd fix things. Half that village had something broken. Pump, tiller, a generator that was older than me, some fella's wave with a fried stator. I'd sit on a plastic stool in the shade with parts laid out on newspaper, and I'd work. And May Samjit would watch from the platform, and about 11 somebody'd put a plate of larb and sticky rice down beside me without a word. They tried to pay me the first few times. I wouldn't have it. Being useful, I keep coming back to that. That's all I've ever known how to be. All right. The hospital. August 2024. May's diabetes had been there the whole time. She'd had it years. She took her tablets and she ate whatever she liked. Same as everybody. Then she got an ulcer on her foot. She didn't tell anybody. San women don't tell anybody. By the time Phi got a phone call from a cousin, it was infected right through, and there was talk of taking the toes. Maybe more than the toes. We got her into the hospital in Udon, not the government one. Phi wanted the private one, and I understood why. And I said yes before she finished asking. Antibiotics, debridement, 10 days, follow-up, 62,000 baht, call it 2,500 Canadian. I paid it at the counter with my card, and my hands were steady, and I didn't think about it for 1 second. And I want to sit here a minute, because this is the part where people at home go, ah, there it is. That's the hook. That's where they got him. No. I've thought about this more than anything else in the whole story, and I'll tell you plainly, that money was correct. That money I'd pay again tomorrow. Here's what you have to understand about how it works out there. The eldest daughter carries the family. That's not a scam. That's not a scheme somebody invented to fleece foreigners. That is just how it is and how it's been for a very long time. Phi had been sending money home since she was 17 years old. Before me. Long before me. She'd have been doing it if I'd never got off that train. And if I'd been back in Alberta, and Dale's wife's mother needed a surgery she couldn't cover, I'd have written the check. Wouldn't have blinked. Wouldn't have thought I was being taken. So no. That wasn't the scam. The problem isn't the 62,000 baht. The problem is what a number like that does to the ones after it. Because after that, the ledger started moving. Ploy's school. She'd got into a decent private place in Udon, big here at $18,000 a term, 700 Canadian, and it was better than the government school, and she was bright, and what am I going to say, no? A cousin, Beam, 19, needed a motorbike to get to a job at the ice factory. Second-hand wave, BH 22,850 Canadian, and it was a job. He got up at 4 in the morning for that job. Songkran came round, and there's the temple, and there's the gifts, and there's the whole extended lot of them, and you don't turn up empty-handed. Not if you're the Farang. Not if you're anything. None of it was outrageous. That's the thing. Every single item on its own, I could look at and say, yes, that's fair. That's reasonable. A decent man does that. But by the back half of 2024, I was running at Butch 20,000, by 22,000 a month, all in, 850 Canadian, against savings that had come down to about $24,000. And there were things I chose not to look at. Phi still sent money to Rayong, every month. Not much. 3,000 baht. And when I asked, she said, for Ploy, for her father to send her things, and I thought, well, of course, that's a man supporting his kid. That's the correct thing, except she was the one sending it to him. I did notice that. I want to be clear that I noticed it. I noticed it, and I looked at it, and I thought, well, Thai families are complicated, and I don't understand the whole picture, and it's 3,000 baht, and if I start interrogating her about 3,000 baht, then I'm one of those bitter old goats in the Irish pub. That's what I told myself. That's exactly what I told myself. And the phone. She started turning her phone face down at dinner. Not hiding it, not sneaking off, just face down. And I thought, well, I'd hate to be watched too. I'd hate a man looking over at my screen. Fair enough. I think about that one a lot, actually. Not because there was anything on the phone. There probably wasn't. It's just that I trained myself over about a year to be a man who doesn't ask. I got very good at it. I'd been in practice a long time. My whole family's like that. You put the thing in a box, and then in October, May asked me something. We were out in Kalasan, and she said something to Phi and Fastasan, and Phi turned to me and said, my mother asked, you are serious? And I said, of course I'm serious. And Phi said something back to her, And May looked at me for a good long second, and then she nodded once and went back to what she was doing. I understood that as, are you going to marry my daughter? Are you going to be here? Are you going to be a man about this? She was asking about paperwork. She was asking whether there was going to be a document with a stamp on it. And I heard romance because I wanted romance, and there is nobody to blame for that but me, because I could follow that conversation. That's the thing. By October 2024, I had enough Thai to catch about half of it. I just wasn't listening for what she was actually saying. I was listening for what I wanted, anyway. The kitchen table. November. I got out the pencil and a piece of paper, and I did what I always do, and I did the arithmetic on what was left. $24,000 Canadian. Burn rate, all in, about $850 a month. Pension doesn't come proper till 60. I'm 53. You do that division. Go on. I did it 4 times because I wanted a different answer. Roughly 2.5 years, and I'm out. And then I'm a 56-year-old man with nothing, in a country where I can't legally work, with a woman and a kid. And here's where a smart man pulls back. Here's where a smart man says, right, we cut this to beach at $12,000 a month. We stop the school, we sit down and have the ugly conversation. I didn't do that. What I did, and I want you to hear the logic, because at the time it was beautiful, it was elegant, I was proud of it. What I did was decide the answer was to go faster. Because rent is dead money. Rent is beyond $9,000 a month, vanishing forever. But a house on our own land, that's not spending. That's building. And a wife means the visa's easier, and the family's settled, and everybody stops asking questions. I sat at that table and I proved to myself, with a pencil, that the safest thing I could possibly do was commit everything. That's what a careful man does when he's frightened. He doesn't stop. He builds a bigger plan. Wayne asked me straight out, at the pub, over a Leo in December, "You buying land, Garth?" And I said, "No." And I meant it when I said it. 2 months later, it wasn't no. The land came up in February 2025, not from Phi. That's important. From May, through a cousin, through Phi, the way everything came, this piece up the road from the village, 3 rai, a bit under 1.25 acres. Owner had gone to Bangkok and wasn't coming back. Shanote title, which is the good kind, the proper registered kind. 380,000 baht. 15,200 Canadian. And I want you to know that I did this properly. I want you to know that because it makes what happened next worse, not better. I knew a foreigner can't own land in Thailand. Everybody knows that. It's on the first page of every forum, every website, every YouTube video. A Farang cannot hold land. Full stop. End of discussion. I knew about the company structures where you set up a Thai limited with nominee shareholders, and it's a nudge-nudge arrangement that a court can undo in about 10 minutes if anybody ever bothers to look. I knew that, so I went to a lawyer, a proper one, in an office on the 2nd floor of a building off Projak Road in Udon. Air conditioning, frame certificates, a woman about 40 in a gray blazer who spoke better English than I do, and she was excellent. I want that on the record too. She did her job. She sat me down and she went through it. She said, you cannot own the land, but you can protect yourself. And there are 3 ways. 1, a usufruct. Siddhi Kep Kin. It's registered at the land office. It goes on the title deed itself, and it gives you the right to live on and use that land for your entire life. Doesn't matter who owns it. Doesn't matter if they sell it. The usufruct rides along with the deed. You can't be removed. She said this is what she recommends, and it costs a few thousand baht, and it takes an afternoon. 2, a registered 30-year lease. Same idea, different mechanism. 3, superficies, which means the land is theirs, but the house on it is legally yours, as a separate thing. She said any one of these. Any of them. Even one is enough. And she looked at me and she said something I've thought about every single day since. She said, Mr. Wilkes, the family will not offer this. You have to ask. And I said, thank you very much. And I paid her for the consultation, and I walked out into that white afternoon heat with a folder full of the right answers. And I never asked. Now, I've had a long time to work out why, and I'm going to give you the real reason, not the flattering one. The flattering one goes like this. Out there, you don't do that. You don't sit down in front of a 65-year-old woman who has fed you and looked after you and let you fix her pump and say, I would like a legal instrument on the deed of this land in case you decide to throw me off it. That's Kreng Jai. That's face. That's the whole architecture of how those people live with each other, and I'd be spitting in it. May would have said yes, probably, and she'd have never looked at me the same way again, and neither would anybody else in that yard, and I'd be the faring who came in with lawyers. That's the flattering reason, and it's not even a lie. All of that is true, but underneath it is a smaller, uglier thing, and here it is. If I asked for the usufruct, I was saying out loud that I didn't trust my own judgment, because I'd already decided this family was good. I checked. 8 months of her refusing money, the books at 9 at night, the Psalm Tam, all of it. I'd done the inspection and I'd signed the sheet, and to walk in there with a lawyer's folder would have been to say, I did all that work and I still don't believe my own eyes. I couldn't do it. 3 years after the placement, I could not stand there and admit I still didn't trust myself, so I put the land in May Samjit's name. Clean. Nothing on my side of the ledger but goodwill. 380,000 baht, and my name isn't on a single piece of paper anywhere in the Kingdom of Thailand. That's not a Thai problem. Let's be clear about that. That's a Garth problem. Thailand told me exactly what to do. It's written down. There's a form. There's a lady in a gray blazer who'll do it for you in an afternoon. I chose not to. The foundation went in April. B1 10,000 Thon, about 4,400 Canadian, and I did a lot of it myself because I wasn't going to sit and watch. Hired a local crew for the digging and the rebar, and then we mixed and poured over 2 days in heat that would kill you if you let it. I hadn't done hard physical work in 3 years, and my back informed me of that at some length. And the second day when it was going off, Ploy came over and looked at me, and I nodded, and she knelt down at the corner and pressed her hand into it. That handprint is still there. Somebody else is going to build a house on top of it. I don't know what to do with that. I still don't. Then the engagement in June, the sin sod, the bride price. Now everybody at home hears about this and thinks it's a scam, and it isn't. It's real. It's old. It's about honor and face and showing the family you can look after her. And it's negotiable. It's absolutely negotiable. And anybody who tells you otherwise is selling something. They opened at 500,000. 500,000 baht, 20,000 Canadian, which I did not have and could not have found. And we negotiated. Properly, respectfully, sat around on the platform with tea, the uncle doing the talking because that's how it's done, me saying almost nothing because that's my role and it always was. We settled on 300,000, 12,000 Canadian, payable on the day. And here's the other bit of arithmetic that made it all feel like it was meant to be. A retirement visa needs $800,000 sitting in a Thai bank, about 22,000 Canadian. I did not have 22,000 Canadian to leave sitting in a bank doing nothing. Not anymore. A marriage visa needs $400,000, 11,000. You understand? Getting married didn't just give me a wife. It halved the thing that was going to push me out of the country. I told myself that was a happy coincidence. It was not a coincidence. It was a reason. It was possibly the reason, and I dressed it up as love, and I'd have punched a man for saying so at the time. Running total, mid-2025. Land, foundation, hospital, the monthly, the school, the bike, 3 years of living. About 21,000 Canadian, gone. Left in the account, 5,000, near enough. Plus the bit 300,000 sinsod I still had to find, which was going to come from, well, from that 5,000 and a bit of hope. Wedding set for October, 8 weeks out. And then in August, Tun called. We were eating. Bit of sam tam, some grilled pork, the fan going. Her phone went and she looked at it and she got up and went out to the yard. She was out there 20 minutes. When she came back in, she'd been crying. Not sobbing, just that look, the eyes. And she sat down and picked up her fork and said, "It's about ploy school. He make problem." And I said, "Okay." That's it. That's what I said. Okay. I want to tell you exactly what that felt like from the inside because I think a lot of you have done it and never had a word for it. There is a moment, it's about a second and a half long, where you can feel two roads. One of them is ask. Just ask. What problem? Why is he calling you about school? Why does he call at all? Why do you send him money? And the other road is nothing. Just eat. And there's this pressure in your chest, and you can feel it wanting to come out as a question. And you swallow it. And it goes down and it sits there, and you know it's there. And you actively decide it's not passive. Don't let anybody tell you it's passive. You decide that you will live with it sitting there rather than find out. That's what choosing to believe is. It's not believing. It's declining to look. I ate my dinner. It was very good. 8 weeks to the wedding. The gathering was on the Wednesday. Wedding was the Sunday. 4 days out. It's not the wedding itself. It's the thing before it, where the family comes and you feed everybody and the aunties inspect you and the whole village works out what it thinks. 40-odd people in the yard. Plastic chairs, the red ones and the blue ones. Everybody's borrowed from everybody. A tarp strung up for shade. 2 big pots going. A pig somebody's cousin brought. Som-tom being pounded in relays so that all afternoon there was that sound. That thump, thump, thump of the pestle, going and going. Somebody had a speaker playing Morlem. Hong thong going round in those little glasses, and rice whiskey out of an old water bottle, which is a thing you should be careful with, and I wasn't. Hot. Late October and still hot, that heavy end of rain's heat where the air's got weight to it. The mosquito coils going under the chairs. And you could see the slab from the yard. Up the road, maybe 200 meters, on our 3 rye, with a blue tarp over it and the rebar sticking up waiting for walls. If you stood by the gate, you could see the corner where the handprint was. I was happy. I want to put that down plainly because it matters. I was happy. For about 6 hours that day, I was as happy as I have been at any time in my life. Ploy was tearing about with the other kids. May was up on the platform holding court with her foot up. Phi's uncle kept refilling my glass and saying something I didn't catch, and laughing, and I'd laugh too. Somebody's grandmother took my hand and patted it for about a minute and a half and never said a word. I sat there in a plastic chair with a paper plate on my knee, thinking, this is the yard I'm going to be old in. 54 years old, and I finally knew where I was going to be old. Around 6:30, it got to be too much. It always does with me. Too many people, too loud, and my ties not good enough to follow 4 conversations at once, even when I'm sober, and I wasn't. So I did what I always do at a party, what I did at every Christmas, do in Grande Cache for 30 years. I got up and I went and found somewhere quiet. Round the side of the house, there's the water tank. Big concrete thing on a stand, and a bit of shade, and a strip of dirt where the dogs sleep. I went and stood there with my glass, and I let my ears stop ringing. And the kitchen window was open. They're always open. There's no glass in half of them out there. Just shutters, and nobody shuts them in October. The window was maybe 3 meters from me, round the corner, and I couldn't see in, and they couldn't see out. Phi and her mother washing up. I want to be very careful here about what I tell you, because I've gone over it 1,000 times and I'm not going to make it dirtier than it was. They weren't plotting. There was no plot. They were doing the dishes and talking, the way women do, and their voices were completely ordinary, tired a bit, cheerful. And it was in Isan mostly, which is not Thai. It's close to Lao, and I only had bits of it. But a lot of it was in Thai too, because Phi grew up on Thai television, and she slides between them. Everybody does. And after 2.5 years and an hour every morning at 5:30 in the dark with my coffee and my flashcards, I could follow it. They didn't know that. Nobody in that family had ever heard me say one word. I'd made sure of it. So the first thing I heard was May saying something about the pig, and Phi laughing. And then May said something about me. I caught my name, or their version of it, Ga, they all called me Ga. And Phi said, and I'm giving you this as close as I can. He's kind. He's not like Tan. He never shouts. He fixed the pump, and he wouldn't take money for it. Do you remember? Ploy loves him. I'm lucky. She said that. I'm lucky. And I stood there by that water tank in the dark with a glass in my hand, and I felt about 9 feet tall. That's the part one need you to hold on to, because everything else is going to come now, and I don't want you to lose it. She meant that. I've never once doubted that she meant that. Then May said something about the land. Shenote, the deed, that word I knew because I'd been staring at it for 8 months. And she said, it's finished. It's done. It's in my name and it can't be moved. And Fi said, yes, just yes. Like you'd say, yes, the rice is in. And May said something like, and when the papers are signed at the Ampher, then he's settled, then he's safe, then he stays. And Fi said yes to that too. And then, and this is the bit, this is the whole bit. This is the 4 seconds that took my life apart. May said, and when there's a house, when everything is quiet, tone can come back from Rayong. And Fi said, not yet, not, no, not. Mother, what are you talking about? Not yet. And then she said something about the school year, and May said something about the pig again, and they went back to the dishes. That was it. That was the whole thing. Maybe 40 seconds of conversation. They didn't lower their voices. They didn't check the window. Why would they? It wasn't a secret. It was just the future. It was the way the thing was going to go, and everybody in that kitchen knew it. And it wasn't cruel, and it wasn't triumphant, and nobody was laughing at me. I want you to understand what nearly killed me about that, because it isn't what you think. It's not that there was a villain. It's that there wasn't. If she'd been a liar, if I'd found a phone full of messages, if some fella had turned up and said, mate, she's done this to 4 of us, I'd have known what to do. I'd have hated her. Hating somebody is easy. Hating somebody is the easiest thing in the world, and I'd have had it done inside a week, and I'd be in that Irish pub right now telling you all about it and buying my own drinks. But she loved me. She loved me, and she'd worked out what I was for, and she saw absolutely no contradiction between those two things. I was the man who was kind and didn't shout, and who Ploy loved. And I was also the thing that got the land bought and the house built and the family safe. And when the house was up and the papers were signed and the whole thing was solid, then the man she'd had a child with, the man she'd been sending 3,000 baht a month to for 2.5 years, could come back, not to take my place, to take his place, which had never actually stopped being his. I was the roof. That's what I was. I was the roof over the family, and a roof is a good thing, and you're grateful for a roof, and you look after it, and you don't lie awake at night wondering whether the roof is happy. I stood there a long time. I'm not going to tell you what I felt because I don't know what I felt. There was a bit where I thought I might be sick and I wasn't. There was a bit where I looked up and there were more stars out there than you ever see in a town. And the moorland was still going, and somebody was shouting at one of the dogs. And underneath all of it, there was this cold, flat, quiet thing that I recognized. And it took me a minute to place it, and then I did. It was the feeling you get when a machine goes wrong on shift. You don't scream, you don't cry, you go very still and very slow, and you do the next correct thing, and then the next one, and you get everybody off the face and up the shaft and into the light, and you fall apart afterwards in the truck. I went back in, I ate, I had another glass. I laughed at something the uncle said. Ploy came and showed me a card she'd made for the wedding. She'd drawn me and Fi, and me too big, and a house, and a sun with a face on it. And I told her it was the best card I'd ever seen, and I put it in my shirt pocket. I sat next to Fi on the mat, and she leaned on my shoulder, and I let her. I slept beside her that night on the floor of the back room with the fan going and the geckos clicking, and I didn't sleep at all. At 5 in the morning, it was just starting to go gray, and the roosters were at it, and somebody's wave went past on the road. I got up. I put my 2 shirts and my papers and my passport in the bag. I put the card in the bag. I took Bash 20,000 out of my belt, 800 Canadian, near enough all the cash I had on me, and I put it on the table by the door with the rice cooker under the little brass Buddha so it wouldn't blow away. I didn't leave a note. What would I write? In what language? Fi was asleep. Ploy was asleep on the mat with her arm over her face. I looked at them for a while, and then I walked out of that yard and up the road, past our 3 ray and the tarp and the slab with the handprint in it, in the gray light, with the mist sitting on the paddy, and I stood at the junction on the highway to Kalasan town and waited for the first song Theo of the day. Nobody came after me. Nobody knew there was anything to come after me for. Let me give you the numbers. Flat, the way you'd write up an incident. Gone. About $21,000 Canadian across 3 years. That's the land at about a year's $80,000. The foundation at Burr $110,000. The hospital at Bush 62,000 charn. 30-odd months of household money and school fees, and the boy's motorbike, and Songkran, and everything else that came in small enough pieces that I never had to think twice about any single one of them. Kept about $5,000. Also kept, and this is the part one have to keep reminding myself of, because it doesn't feel like keeping anything. The back 300,000 sin sod I never paid, the marriage certificate I never signed, and my pension, untouched, which pays properly at 60 and I'm 54, and I'll live. 6 years to go and $5,000 in the bank. That's not a retirement, but it isn't nothing. And 4 days later, it would have been nothing. I went back to that lawyer in Udon, the one in the gray blazer, sat in the same chair. She looked at the paperwork, and she was very quiet and very professional, and she said essentially, there is nothing. No usufruct on the deed, no lease, no superficies. The land is May Samjits. The concrete on it is May Samjits, and a Canadian who paid for it has no standing in any Thai court because a Canadian isn't permitted to have any. And she didn't say, I told you so. She didn't even look at me like it. She was kind about it, and she didn't charge me for the second consultation. That was worse. If she'd been sharp with me, I could have got angry at her. I've thought a lot about who to be angry at, and I keep coming back empty, and that's the hardest part of this whole thing. Because let me be very clear with you about Phi. She didn't lie to me, not once that I know of. She told me Tan was finished, and here's the thing. I think she believed it when she said it, and I think it stopped being true somewhere in the middle, and there was never a moment when she sat down and decided to deceive me. It just drifted. Things drift. Ask anybody who's been married. She loved me. I heard her say it to her mother in a kitchen when she thought there was nobody in the world who could hear. That's not the sort of thing you fake. Nobody fakes it in ISIN to a wall. And she'd also worked out what I was for. Both at the same time. And she saw no contradiction, and I've come to think that's because there isn't one, not out there. Not for a 34-year-old woman with a sick mother and a kid, and a job that pays $16,000 a month, and a man in Ryong she never quite finished with. She wasn't a schemer. She was a person doing arithmetic, same as me. Her arithmetic just had me in it as a number. You want me to hate her? I can hear it. I can hear you wanting me to. I can't do it. I've tried. And every time I get up a good head of steam about it, I think about her standing in that dealership at 9 at night fixing the owner's son's mess. And I lose it. And ploy. God, ploy. I've got the card. It's in a plastic sleeve in my bag. Me and Phi in a house and a son with a face on it. And me drawn about twice the size I should be. She's 11 now. She'll be 12 in November. She thinks I left. Well, I did leave. That's exactly what I did. I don't know how you explain to a kid that the man who taught you to change a spark plug isn't coming back because of a 40-second conversation he wasn't supposed to hear. You don't. There's no version of that. So she just thinks I left. That's the thing I'd take back if I could take one thing back, and it isn't the money. I'm in Nong Khai now. Have been since November. Room above a shop, $3,500 a month, $140. You can see the Mekong from the end of my street if you stand in the right spot. Brown and wide and slow, and Laos on the other side. Close enough to hit with a stone. I do small engine repair. Off the books, which I'm aware is not strictly correct, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. Pumps, generators, outboards, Kubotas, the odd wave. Expats mostly, some Thais. Word gets round. There's a Dutch fella down the way keeps bringing me a Yanmar that ought to have been scrapped in about 2009, and I keep bringing it back to life because I like him and I like the puzzle. It's the first thing since the drag line that I do well and know I do well. I'm on a retirement visa now, just barely, on the income route rather than the Bosch $800,000. My Canadian pension paperwork just about clears the bar with a bit of squinting. I do the 90-day report at the immigration office, and I sit in the plastic chair with everybody else, and it takes 4 hours and I don't mind it. I've got nowhere to be. Wayne comes down sometimes. He never says I told you so either. He said one thing once, about a month after, and then never again. He said, "You got out, Garth." And I said, "Yeah." I still haven't told Dale. He thinks I'm married. I've been sending him photos of the Mekong. I'll tell him. Eventually. All right. Here's the thing I actually want to say. This is the bit that's worth your time. Everybody tells you to do your diligence. Every single person, every forum, every video. Do your homework, learn the language, meet the family, watch the money, don't be a mug. I did all of it, every item. 14 months of flashcards at 5:30 in the morning. 2 years before I gave her a single baht. I met the family, I fixed their pump, I ate their samtam. I went to a real lawyer and I paid for real advice and I put the folder in my bag. I did the diligence. And I still walked into it, and here's why, and this is what I want you to actually hear. Diligence performed by a man who needs the answer to be yes is not diligence. It's a ceremony. It looks the same from the outside. It's got all the same steps. But it isn't checking. It's a ritual you do so that later you can say, I checked. That's what I did with the placement too. I read the prospectus twice. I looked up the directors, and I signed anyway because I wanted it, and the reading was just something I did to make the wanting feel respectable. Checking and hoping wear the same coveralls. From a distance, you cannot tell them apart. And I'd been working in the dark my whole life. So how do you tell? How do you actually tell? Here's the only test I've got, and it cost me $21,000 and a kid who thinks I left her. So take it or leave it. Ask the ugly question early. While it's still cheap, ask for the usufruct. Ask why she sends money to Rayong. Ask what finished means. Ask whoever it is out loud in words, the thing you are most afraid to ask. And if asking it would end the relationship, then you have your answer, and you got it for free. That's it. That's the whole of it. Everything else I could tell you, all the numbers, all the visa rules, the Shanot, the City Kepkin, the by 400,000 versus the by 800,000, all of that is just detail. The ugly question is the only real diligence there is. I didn't ask because asking would have meant admitting I still didn't trust myself. And I'd rather have lost the money than admit that. Well, I did admit it, and I lost the money too. You get to do it in either order, is what I've learned, but you don't get to skip it. Anyway, the Mekong's nice. Come by if you're up this way. Bring something broken. That was Garth Wilkes. Here's what we'd ask you to take from this one, because it would be easy to file it under the same heading as everything else, and it doesn't belong there. Nobody scammed him. There's no villain in this story and no police report to file, because nothing that happened to Garth Wilkes was a crime. Faye loved him. She also had a mother with a rotting foot, a daughter to raise, a man in Rayong she'd never finished with, and a Farang who arrived offering a future she had every reason to take and no reason to look at too hard. Two people can love each other and be building two entirely different houses. And the money, the B490,000 in land and concrete that belongs to somebody else now, is gone for one reason. One, he didn't ask for a usufruct. That's a real thing with a real name. City Kepkin. It's registered on the title deed at the land office, it survives a sale, and it lasts your whole life. There's also a superficies for the structure and a registered 30-year lease. Any one of them would have saved him. All three together cost less than a decent second-hand motorbike. We've put the terms in the pinned comment. Take them to a lawyer, not to a bar stool. But the deeper thing Garth gave us isn't legal. It's this. If you're standing 4 days out from something, a wedding, a deed, a transfer, and there's a question sitting in your chest that you have decided not to ask, that question is the only one that matters. Ask it while it's still cheap. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time on This is Thailand.